These long-range missile strikes from Ukrainians using Western missiles have kind of shown again that they're not where they need to be in terms of even defending Russian territory, much less taking more Ukrainian territory. But they'll continue to fire rockets in that direction, particularly aiming at infrastructure, in order to make life harder for the Ukrainians without necessarily winning much ground.
Now, as we've been saying, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has confirmed this evening that Russia's launched a new hypersonic medium-range missile against the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The Russian president said that the strike was in response to the launch of Western-supplied missiles into the border region of Kursk yesterday. Patrick Tucker is the technology editor at Defence One. Patrick, good evening to you.
Good evening.
We've heard from Vladimir Putin tonight. He said in case of escalation, we'll respond symmetrically. This, of course, is in response to the UK and US sanctioning the use of long-range missiles supplied by them to Ukraine. So here is a bar back, I suppose, in words and in action from Putin and Vladimir and Russia. Are we going to see more of this, do you think? More from Russia?
I think that they're going to find a lot of different ways to create discomfort, particularly for European allies, but also to an extent for the United States. I think that messing too much with the United States could imperil a potentially beneficial negotiation that President-elect Donald Trump could champion after he takes office. But this most recent missile strike with this experimental missile is very much intended to intimidate European allies from continuing to support Ukraine, especially in this critical time when they have really just a matter of weeks to secure some positioning in order to go into negotiations that are likely to start happening shortly after Donald Trump takes office, around probably, the late end of January or February.
What do we know specifically about the missile that was used by Russia today, this experimental missile, as you put it?
Well, not too much. Early this morning, there was speculation that it was a type of missile called an RS-26 IRBM, and that seemed to sort of really catch on with a lot of people. I've since been told that it's probably not an RS-26. It's exactly what it is. It's some type of IRBM, some type of intermediate range ballistic missile. But what's most important about it, according to folks that I've talked to, is that it has the capacity to contain multiple warheads. So multiple different warheads shot out of this thing, possibly 6. And that is incredibly hard to intercept. And that's part of why you're seeing a lot of folks in Europe and across the United States that talk about missiles all the time treat this as somewhat different. This is very much a statement to NATO allies, basically letting them know that they have that Russia has a new missile that can range really to a variety of different spots in Europe. It does carry multiple warheads, and it is capable, probably because it can carry multiple warheads, of potentially carrying a nuclear payload, though obviously a nuclear weapon was not used here. That's what is really to take away from it. It's the multiple warheads. Whether or not it's an RS-26 or not, we'll find out later. But the capability that was on display, pretty intimidating.
Understood. Look, the White House, we've heard from them, Karine Jean-Pierre, White House spokesperson, in the last few minutes, last sort of 20 minutes or so. They've said Russia is to blame for escalating at every turn in its war in Ukraine. That escalation includes Russian ally North Korea adding troops to join Russian President Vladimir Putin's war effort. This is what Jean-Pierre has been telling reporters. So here we go, sort of, I suppose, stating the facts is what you'd say in response to this. The West is not backing down in its condemnation of Russia. No one's prepared to show any weakness at all. I wonder what you made of Maria Zakharova, Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson. She was doing her sort of regular briefing earlier, and she was asked about the Russian ballistic missile attack. And she got a phone call, didn't she, Patrick? I know that you saw this sort of halfway through the briefing, sort of asking her not to comment.
Right, exactly. This is very similar to a gimmick that I pull when I'm in an awkward conversation with someone and I want an easy exit. arm for 5 minutes at the ring to an old telephone ring, and then it's like, oh my, sorry, I've got to go. So yes, this is clearly intended for Western audiences to get people to talk a little bit more about this and reinforce the idea that there's all sorts of different capabilities that Russia may put on display, and they're having a fun internal dialogue about exactly how to reveal them. And that's also, part of the reason for all of this is to cover over the systemic weaknesses that we're seeing across the Russian military. Vladimir Putin attempted to mobilize 100,000 people to go and particularly defend Kursk, but the problem is that he can't pull people out of St. Petersburg or Moscow because that's going to create tremendous instability for his regime. You can't pull people necessarily out of the provinces anymore because already you've taken far too many young able-bodied men and put them into basically a meat grinder. They have tremendous inflation that they're experiencing right now. The war economy is not going to be sustainable, and that is why they had to go to North Korea and ask them for 100,000 troops that have never seen a drone, many of them, and so they're not faring particularly well there either. So a lot of what you're seeing here is really to get people to talk about something other than the fact that the war still isn't going particularly well for Vladimir Putin. He's having to push a lot of buttons. He becomes more indebted to China every day, and now he's relying on different resources from folks like North Korea and Iran. He's losing a lot of strategic power, and at some point it's going to become politically unsustainable for him if they continue on this path. So he's trying to secure as much territory as he can before this negotiation happens, including winning back territory in Kursk, which is his primary objective for the next few months. And it's an open question whether or not he can do that. These long-range missile strikes from Ukrainians using Western missiles have kind of shown again that they're not where they need to be in terms of even defending Russian territory, much less taking more Ukrainian territory. But they'll continue to fire rockets in that direction, particularly aiming at infrastructure, in order to make life harder for the Ukrainians without necessarily winning much ground.
Interesting. Look, Moscow's ambassador to London, Andrei Kelin, spoke to Sky News earlier today and said, Britain and the UK is now directly involved in this war. He was talking about the use of long-range Storm Shadow missiles by Ukraine to hit targets inside Russia. He said this firing cannot happen without NATO staff, British staff as well. So there you go. Britain now directly involved in the war in Ukraine, according to Russia. Should we be worried at all, Patrick? What do we interpret from that?
I think you should interpret it as just sort of continued Russian threatening. They are fixed by Article 5. NATO's an Article 5 nation. All NATO nations can invoke Article 5 for that treaty for mutual defense. So he's not going to commit conventional warfare against a NATO ally. We've seen for months, though, actually going back almost a year, ever-increasing hybrid warfare attacks. That's probably going to continue, but that's going to happen either way because his entire goal, of course, is to shame and degrade Western democracies so that they become less favorable a contrast to the dysfunctional Russian state that he's created. So there's no step that NATO could, or any NATO nation could take that would de-escalate Vladimir Putin because his objectives remain the same regardless of what he's doing or what's happening to him. And again, if NATO weren't such a formidable piece of opposition to him, then why would he have invaded Ukraine to pretend to keep them out of NATO, which is also not part of the reason he did it. He imagines he's going to reconstitute the empire of Catherine the Great. So I think that it's something to remind all of us that no matter what happens, Vladimir Putin is intent on threatening the West. That's going to be his intention until he leaves office, one way or another. And, just steady on is, I think, the message for everybody. This is a man that is realizing the limitations of his own power, and particularly how limited his negotiation position is going to be after the first of the year. So, steady on is all I think the main message that a lot of folks should take away from this.